Both of them are going. We are up and running. Oh, can you bring the chair over for Mr. Schmiggy, please? It helps to pick up and pull. It's one of those things that's easier to pick up and pull than it is to push. Hi, Simeon!
Hello.
You want to... I don't think Papa and Grandma and Grandpa are on there yet. Nope.
Who's on?
There are maybe people on YouTube and Facebook. Nobody in Zoom quite yet. Bless you.
Morning, Pastor.
Good morning, Nathan. How are you doing? Oops. Need to unmute myself before I say good morning. Good morning.
The 103rd Psalm is my favorite psalm.
Yeah.
Anytime that's involved, I'm all ears.
It's my favorite until I start reading 139, and then that's my favorite until I start reading 25 or. And then I come back around and I'm like, oh, that's right. 103rd is my favorite, and
Yeah, it's like trying to pick your favorite kid. You can't.
oh no, I can pick that. Simeon might be out in the hallway. Yeah. It's like hymns. Depending on what season of the church you were in, like I will. I was going to say, I'll swear up and down that Salvation Unto Us Has Come is the best hymn that's ever been written until we get to Advent, and then O Come Emmanuel, you think, whoa, man, that's just, that's obviously the best hymn.
That hymn we sang today, not the last one, but the second to the last one.
Oh, yeah, the love
too.
of...
I was getting a little misty.
Yeah, there's... Yeah,
and ransom captive.
you can't convince me that that's not the best hymn in the world when we get to Advent.
Good morning.
And then we get to Easter, and there's no better hymn than Awake My Heart with Gladness. Yeah. And on Reformation, you can't get better than yeah.
This is our God, a trusting shield.
But I think
Turn off waiting room, maybe.
I think that maybe salvation unto us has come should be sung a little bit more in Christian churches, considering 52%. 52% believe they are saved by their good works rather than faith in Christ as their
When I
Savior.
heard that this morning, I was like, oh my goodness, it's like Martin Luther in every beat.
I would expect that of the 70% of Roman Catholics.
Right.
Um,
But hey, I mean, there's plenty of Reformed churches that believe that if you're living that good life, then you're somehow not.
yeah. Good morning, all. We will go back to Sunday school, to Bible history lessons, and to a couple of the best known stories, and we even hesitate to call them stories, accounts in the scriptures, in the next few chapters of Daniel. But before we begin with Daniel chapter 3, let's begin with prayer. Lord, open thou my heart to hear, and through thy word to me draw near. Let me thy word ever pure retain. Let me thy child and heir remain. All this I ask in Jesus' name. Amen. So as we're looking at Daniel chapter 3, we're keeping in mind this dual theme and question, maybe that we ask as we go along. And the first is that question that comes from Psalm 136. How can we sing the song of the Lord while we're in a foreign land? And the Israelites were forced to deal with that when they were in captivity. Daniel is forced, how am I going to confess my faith and sing the song of God's faithfulness to me and to all sinners while I'm stuck in this situation? And when we start asking a question like that, that's the one that we need to be able to answer. And so Daniel helps us to do that. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego help us to do that. And then the other theme that will come up again and again, and it was prompted by Nebuchadnezzar's actions in the beginning and taking those sacred vessels from the temple of the Lord and bringing them to his own house, and then bringing Daniel and all these, the cream of the crop Jewish people to Babylon, and then eventually deporting the rest of the Jews. What is going to happen when God squares off against God with a capital G against gods with a lowercase g, the gods who don't exist? What is going to happen again and again when the Lord steps onto the battlefield against myths and legends and false belief? All right, so to begin to see it on display so beautifully, let's read all the way down to, I suppose, through verse 7.
King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So, the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "This is what you are commanded to do, O peoples, nations, and men of every language. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up." Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace.
All right, the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
So if we go back and we remember what has happened, verse in the second chapter, as Daniel interpreted this dream for Nebuchadnezzar in a way that showed that God versus gods is never a fair match. That the one true God, God doesn't dwell with men, and God isn't going to let you know the meaning of your dream, and especially if you don't let us know what the dream was to begin with. And God gives to Daniel all of it, and shows his power and authority, and Nebuchadnezzar recognizes that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether this is like like the Batman theme that this is shortly after, or whether this is a couple of years later. But here Nebuchadnezzar is, having witnessed the power of God, the one true God, the sovereign Lord, jumping back in and jumping back onto this idol train. So old habits are hard to break. But Nebuchadnezzar had said some right words in chapter 1. And this is where, like, if that had been all I heard in chapter 1, I'd be like, oh man, I really hope that there were other opportunities that Daniel got to tell him about the one true God, so that Nebuchadnezzar didn't just like the demons know who God is, but don't believe in him. That Nebuchadnezzar, perhaps the Holy Spirit would create faith in his heart. Whether he did or didn't, here Nebuchadnezzar is making a 90-foot high, 9-foot wide. That's pretty substantial idol. Why should we be surprised? Should we be surprised that someone comes into that the power of God comes into stark relief for them, and that they run back to, or it doesn't seem to affect them, they continue on in their ways to with idols?
We should
trying to find. I'm expecting after I get done with all that you're going to crystallize that question for me a little bit better.
So we should never be surprised, I don't think, at crass idolatry, and we should never be surprised at subtle idolatry.
Okay.
And I think we should be less surprised when it's subtle idolatry, right?
Yeah.
Like the when I idolize my own decision making ability,
Sure.
or my wisdom, or whatever the thing is, like I definitely expect that out of people. And so when I think there's like the second grade Sunday school viewpoint on all sorts of idol worship is like they were worshiping an idol instead of the one true God.
Okay.
And there, I think there's a little bit of room for grown-up nuance when we look at some of these things. King Nebuchadnezzar might have been trying to make a really obvious point about his wealth and his power and who's in charge. And yes, this is an absolute monarchy, right?
Yeah.
And so when he's asking people to worship this, he might be looking at this more of along the lines of like a vow of fealty,
Political expediency.
yeah,
or something.
yeah. And so,
Yeah.
but where this comes to be a rub or a problem with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah is that they have been told, "Thou shalt not make any graven image," and so whether it is crass idolatry or it's a political statement, it's going to run up against things in the First Commandment genre.
So I look and we have this. This is. I don't. Not to belittle second grade Sunday school type thinking, but when I was in second grade in Sunday school, I was baffled that the Israelites could ever struggle with their worship of the one true God after they.
How did you make a golden calf?
You walked through the Red Sea. You saw these miracles. You beheld all this power. And in my mind, because even as a second grader, I was an arrogant little snot, I would think to
Hey, me
myself,
too.
no way I could ever, no. Far be it from me to ever see something so obvious and then turn away from it as if I hadn't even seen it. and I appreciate your nuanced understanding of perhaps Nebuchadnezzar. He was just going on with regular business as usual after he had, well, yeah, I know that you're the sovereign God overall, that he maybe in some ways sees no contradiction whatsoever between acknowledging who that God is. Wow, you're really powerful, and making everybody bow down to this over here. And then that's a place where I think of new converts or people who are new to the Christian faith, kind of not not understanding that it's wonderful that you rejoice in what Jesus has done for you, but now that means that the affair that you're having, or the relationship that you're in outside of WebLodge, or the sinful whatever it is part of your life, is something that you need to address. And I hadn't thought about that yet. And that's why we continue to grow in our faith and understanding. The John Calvin quote, the human heart is an idol factory. We will continue to make and find or promote idols for ourselves. And so I'm not really surprised that Nebuchadnezzar slips back into this or continues on in this. All right.
One way or another, totally makes sense.
And when we start looking at this a little further, maybe God continues to set up things for the good of his people, for Daniel, and also for Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
Because he's going to nudge in a large way in what happens here. Yeah. All right. So it's always awesome when the lists that Daniel has here, the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and then all the musical instruments later. The question that I get to here, though, from the summons and the arrival and the announcement, everybody's here, everybody's brought in front of this thing, and then everybody gets this dictated to them. This is what you're going to do. When you hear the sound of the horn, zither, flute, lyre, harp, pipes, all kinds of music, you must fall down. You alluded to it, but is it just because he wants to get everybody worshiping this God, or what is Nebuchadnezzar seeking to accomplish here?
Let other people need to answer.
Okay, good.
And I think we're all adults here. You can just unmute and say your answer.
Yeah,
It'll
you
work
can
out
do that.
just
Yeah,
fine.
you don't have to. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead,
but
and unmute
I'll
if you've
play
got
some
something.
music anyway.
Yeah, go ahead. Nathan liked that this morning.
It's a good song.
Because we kind of will see it throughout the rest of Daniel too. Nathan has it there. He's making everybody aware that he's the one in charge. This is power on display, and I guess I'd take from anybody. I mean, you can see this in a. I shouldn't use too many. You can see this in a council meeting. You can see this in a Monday morning meeting at work. You can see this amongst kindergartners deciding what they want to do. You know, for recess and things. Like one person can sometimes stand up and this is a total power move by Nebuchadnezzar. Like, everybody, you listen to me. You are going to do what I tell you to do when I tell you to do it. And you are going to get, quite literally, you are going to get down on your knees and worship the thing that I just made. And everybody has to do this, because by doing that, you're submitting to me, because I'm the one who's powerful here. Zach says Nebuchadnezzar does want to be in charge. Also, going back to renaming Dan, yeah, it was a power move to give them new names. You don't get your name. I will tell you I'll tell you. It's like when I want you to do something, I will tell you to do it. I'm going to give you the name that you're going to go by. And then I think he's also hoping, as they were strong, they would pay homage to their God. Yeah, there's something about recognize the power here rather than any
Yeah.
other god.
I think if you have a kingdom, you, in order to keep order, you have to have people know how the power structure works. And the ultimate proof of that is if you had a perfect benevolent leader who did have all dictatorial authority or whatever, you would still have people who would want to rebel and revolt, right? And the proof positive for that is God himself, right?
Yeah.
Perfect
Yeah.
wisdom, perfect love,
Yeah.
and still people want to rebel and revolt against
Yeah.
God. And so anyone less than God needs to find a way
Certainly is
to
gonna be the-
help people get in line, or force people to get in line, or scare people to get in line. And whichever one of those this was, it makes sense for Nebuchadnezzar to do that.
So Nebuchadnezzar understands well the more recent adage, it's better to be feared than
Loved.
and most, because you want, I don't know, I'm really pulling for him that like we're
Oh,
gonna see him
totally.
in heaven, because it would be awesome to talk to this guy who obviously was just horrifyingly twisted in his ability to do things that are horrifying. And I'm not making light of these Babylonians are ancestors of the Assyrians that Jonah wanted to see burn in hell. And we read Jonah's words this morning.
Ancestors, descendants, right?
Descendants. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
But yeah,
Kissing cousins of
Yeah.
those Ninevites, those
Mm-hmm.
Assyrians were just these the stories that are told about what they did to people that they conquered. It's just horrifying.
Yeah.
Like flaying alive
Ugh.
and burying people up to their necks and all, just awful. Nebuchadnezzar is part of that world. And this, before we think of him as some kind of just
It's-
kook who wants to set up an idol and have everybody worship it, this isn't the VeggieTales version of Nebuchadnezzar.
And it's not like, it's nothing new and it's nothing old either.
No,
Because, like,
yeah.
go travel to Western China and you've got all sorts of the stories coming out of like the Uyghur re-education camps are heinous,
Yeah.
and terrible.
It's going to be, we're going to look back and we will say, yeah, we ignored a lot of things that were going on, and it's horrifying.
Yeah.
It's absolutely horrifying. All right. Whoever doesn't fall down and worship immediately will be thrown into a blazing furnace. Not quite true, but we'll see. How about verses 7 to 12?
Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the peoples, nations, and men of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You have issued a decree, O king, that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, O king. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up."
All right. Word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
I'm going to go get a coffee.
No, go ahead. Verse 8 there. So these astrologers, part of the group that Daniel had been selected for and trained to be part of, and eventually became the great leader of these astrologers, these wise men. So some of these wise men come forward and denounce the Jews. The question that I had there is, do we remember what would have happened to all of them had Daniel not stepped forward in chapter 2 to say, don't do that. Please don't do that, Nebuchadnezzar. Not just don't get angry. Don't take all of your wise men and cut them up into small pieces
Yeah.
and turn their houses into rubble and kill their families. they would have been dead men had Daniel not stepped forward by God's grace and with God's power to act. But what does it tell you about the hatred of God's people, and not just specifically anti-Semitism in Old Testament or even in the New Testament, but anti-Christian hatred? What does it tell you about hatred of God's people? Dark times have us o'ertaken. Yeah. So
What mode is that in?
what is
Oh, never mind.
what is a mode?
Never mind.
What is
So
that's
modes.
Lord look down from heaven above. Oh, Lord
Right.
look down from heaven above. And
I thought that was modal. So when modal music is like you take the C scale, C major scale, ba-da-da-da-da-da, but then Dorian mode is you take the C major scale and you start on D and end on D. And then there's like Lydian mode and
Dorian,
Mixolydian mode, Ionic, yeah. All of the there are a bunch of different modes, and
I heard these words.
they just take those 8 white keys and then you just use the starting point of any one of them as like the starting as a root, the starting and the ending of it, and you get all these different sounds.
Okay.
And that's what. So a lot of the things that Luther sang were in some of those modes,
Okay.
and this might have originally been modal, but then they just changed it for better singing or something like that.
I learned something today, and Liz is going, I know all that.
I'm sorry.
Oh, Lord, look down from heaven above might overtake when we get to Reformation. It starts to overtake, maybe after Reformation and end times, it starts to overtake my favorite hymn place too. So that's just for Nathan earlier. All right.
Yeah.
The question that I asked: what does it tell us about the hatred of God's people? Randy and Joyce say it reminds us that if you think human logic can change the heart, you're mistaken. Yeah, there's no logic to this hatred.
A lovely statement.
If you think
I'm gonna get that on the
you are
poster.
going to be able to reason someone into a change of heart, you're still trying to use the carrot or the stick.
Yeah.
You're appealing to the carrot or the stick. And the carrot and the stick do not change hearts. They do not produce real change. They don't produce love.
Yeah.
Nathan says, I'll go back to the first promise of the Savior in Genesis 3, that enmity between the offspring of Satan and the offspring of the woman, or God's people, between your offspring and hers. There will be enmity. And it won't have wisdom and purpose and logic to it. It may at times, we might be able to see some. I understand why it is that someone hates me for this teaching. But sometimes it won't have a logic to it. And that's where I don't know whether to give the devil credit or to show it as further proof of his foolishness, that sometimes there's no wisdom in it. It's just raw anger and hatred and for God and his people. And so don't think that it's going to that some pointing out something that you think is helpful is going to change things for them. Only the gospel can produce that change. It also has a little bit to do. I hope that we can be helpful to people that are struggling right now with understanding that you can't just demand that people think this way, otherwise we are going to destroy you. Because that's where Nebuchadnezzar, if you're not going to get on board and support this and do this, we're going to destroy you. And it might, some of the things that you might want me to support might be helpful, but if it's only going to be done at the point of a gun, then you're not going to get what you're looking for. You're not going to get the real change you're looking for. That's a bigger societal thing. But it's something that we can be helpful with, I think.
Yeah.
I think.
The human heart is well, it's an idol factory, as Nate mentioned, and it's also just willing to call things what they are not. You know, like call good evil and call evil good. That's another. I don't.
The
remember.
theologian,
Yeah,
the theologian of the glory and the theologian of the cross. The
That's-
theologian of
Is
glory,
that Heidelberg?
Heidelberg,
Yes.
Luther's Heidelberg Disputation. Yep. To call what is evil good and to call what is good evil. We're doing a whole lot of that. Very similar to teaching in high school. When something bad happens to another student in a car accident, you logically think that all the other students can change their driving habits. Yeah, that seeing something is necessarily going to change the heart, like showing the blood runs red on the highway. Is that the old? Is that what somebody tried to show you at some time, Zach? And to get you to drive safe.
Scared Straight program.
That
so
and
that's
the
just, yeah.
what was the Reefer Madness? Reefer Madness.
Refrigerator trucks?
No, not the refrigerator trucks. Reefer Madness was, that must have been late '60s, early '70s, just a scare flick to scare people away from marijuana. All right, so coming back to the words of the astrologers, there's some Jews that you've set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They pay no attention to you, and neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set. So that first one, though, is it true or is it a lie? They pay no attention to you, because I think that we'd have to say, no, they do pay attention to you. They serve you really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason you appointed them to these positions, and Daniel encouraged you to do so. And if you look probably at the things that they did, you would find that you've been well served in having them there. But they do slip in some truth next to that lie, and isn't that the way the devil always works?
Oh yeah.
But the truth next to the lie is they don't serve your gods, and they will not worship the image of gold that you have set up. Scared Straight. That's the Driver's Ed movie. Yeah, even that would have a different name today. Verses. Go ahead in verses 13 to 15.
Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then, what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?"
And I keep going back to this, and I haven't really consulted any other like Bible commentary to see what kind of thought they might have on it. Maybe because I just don't think of things that everybody else thinks of, and thinks of things that nobody else thinks of. I don't know whether the devil is just an idiot and keeps stumbling into these things, or whether, and it's probably the answer is yes, God in his power and wisdom strings along the devil to say and do the dumbest things so that he can be proven such a fool. Because maybe this is part of what leads people to say, yeah, this is a Homer writing this, and not Homer the Greek writer.
Yeah.
This is a guy who just wants to make everybody else look foolish. We know that's not true. And we know what is true is that God just allows and uses the devil to do these things so that his power and authority and his grace are shown in such stark contrast. Mm-hmm. What a thing to say. What a setup.
Yeah.
What God is going to be able to save you from my hand? Moo! I mean, it's a James Bond flick. It's a whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Who's gonna save you now? Well, as it turns out, the one true God is going to save me from this. And what an awesome setup this always is. I don't know anybody else's thoughts there. You can go and unmute yourself and share any thoughts as we get into the meat of and some things we need to dig into.
Yeah. This right here is the center point of the chapter.
Right.
And there's this Hebrew structural element, chiasm, right? Mm-hmm. And where you like build from the end and the beginning of the story and have the central idea right at the middle. And if you look at this, you've got like the very first chunk is Nebuchadnezzar setting up this image and declaring that everybody needs to worship it. You go all the way to the end, spoiler alert, Nebuchadnezzar is saying everybody needs to worship the true God, right? And then as you have the call out to that you're going to have to be in the furnace if you don't, and the guys are in the furnace and they're not harmed. And
so they get thrown in, some guys die.
Yeah,
and afterward, some guys are perfectly okay, and right in the middle.
Yeah, so you have this mirror image structure, and right in the middle is this statement: "Who can save you?
Yeah,
who can save you?" It's the most important question of the Book of Daniel. It's the answer to how can we sing the songs of our Lord in the foreign land?
Yep.
Because
that's part of the
answer to this question.
That's part of sing. Go ahead and sing one of your songs of how powerful your God is. You go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Because your God has been proven to be powerless now, and in faith, and this is part of that. Going back to Elijah, the still small voice, the gentle whisper, not always the great displays of power. All right, 16. Go all the way to 23, I guess.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace.
Dun, 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 dun. The first question there, maybe we come back to as we go through, but they will use the phrase, they address him, O king, O Nebuchadnezzar. These are guys who are under the threat of death, and it's not fear that's leading them to address him in this respectful way. It's how they address the authority that God has established. The question they ask, there's a vast difference between rebelling against authority and obeying God rather than men. Like there's a big difference between revolting against an authority that God has established and being spiteful and arrogant, resentful, all sorts of other things. There's a big difference between sinfully rebelling against authority and speaking truth to power, speaking to the authority and saying, I must obey God rather than men. And in this, you don't hear any spite in these,
right.
in the words of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Even though there's some moxie in being able to say, we don't need to defend ourselves against this. So that question, how do we navigate sometimes falling off the horse on the one side into senseless, just frustrated anger and rebellion against authority? How do we navigate between that and on the other side, following along and doing what is wrong? How do we navigate that, obeying God rather than men? Any thoughts that you have there? Go ahead and think for just a second. Nathan says, if authority commands, we act in a way contrary to what God's word says. We have to disobey and bear the punishment that comes. There's a resignation, I guess, that I will suffer bad government and the effects of bad government if it in the times when obeying the government is still the right thing to do and I think it's stupid and it's a bad decision, I will suffer it. And I will suffer the consequences if I have to say, no, I will not.
Yeah.
And whatever those consequences may be. And so on both sides of that is a Christian acting in faith. Help me to be a light in this dark world, and help me to have the confidence to speak like this. I don't need to defend myself. What's so hard about saying that?
Yeah, I mean, that I don't need to defend myself. When someone is wrong, my gut reaction is to go. What?
It's the meme, the internet
Oh,
meme.
yeah.
Honey, it's time for you to come to bed. No, wait, there's somebody wrong on the internet.
Yeah,
You know, somebody's
yeah.
typing and saying, there's somebody wrong on the internet. There's somebody wrong on the internet everywhere. And having to prove someone wrong, or even worse, no. Don't. I will defend myself.
Mm-hmm.
I will not be accused of being wrong on this.
Right.
I am going to be proved right. Is such a desire.
Yeah.
And certainly then to defend myself when I'm being attacked.
Right. And so that's the thing. Like when you're faced with this thing, you've got something that is wrong and you've got to deal with it. You've got a few different options, right? You can go along with it and be wrong yourself. You can silently do the right thing. You can politely do the right thing and let the wrong person know, or you can make a fool of yourself by doing the wrong thing. And then there's like the other, like, jab your thumb into the eye as hard as you can while telling them that they're wrong. What is that? 5 different options that we have? There are a lot of different ways you can do this, and some only one of them is really abjectly wrong, which is the one where you make a fool of yourself. You know, the other ones might be
There's
the
some
right
great-
thing.
So and then we have this. Then we have this example. He didn't open his mouth.
Yeah.
He was accused
Mhm.
of what for him was the most heinous crime, blaspheming the name of the Lord. And he did not, and when he was accused, he refused to defend himself. He would not open his mouth to point out how ridiculous your stupid, made-up accusations are.
And so for these 3 guys to take the polite road and say, we don't need to defend ourselves.
We don't
Like
need to defend ourselves.
they tell him he's dead wrong.
Yeah.
Without telling him he's dead wrong.
As
right?
nicely as they possibly can.
Right. And then we get to Nathan's comment that so we don't need to defend ourselves. We don't need to, there's nothing to be said. Everything that he said was true. Of course we haven't done this, you know? And therefore, we would much rather be in the hands of our God than in our own ability to work through this or reason with you. We would much rather lean into our God's loving arms in this situation.
So that's what brings us to that next statement that they make. Well, we don't need to defend ourselves. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve, it's just I come back to this again and again, and I marvel. He's able to save us, and they could have just stopped there. And He will rescue us from your hand, O King. I think they absolutely knew what they meant when they said, "My God can save me." That like the leper, you can heal me if you are willing. You can heal me, and those words, Jesus, I will it, be clean. are so awesome because it is the best part of praying in faith to be able to say, Lord, your will, not my will, be done.
Yeah.
I know you can do this, and I pray that you will, but I am confident that whatever it is that you decide is going to be right and best for me.
Absolutely.
And that's so amazing. Our God is able to save us, and we want you to know, even if he doesn't, we don't regret doing this. We didn't. If we die in here, it isn't because we screwed up. It isn't because you guys bet on the wrong horse or whatever else. We just want you to know, because there's a chance here that he could decide to let us die.
Yeah.
So how does that? What do we do with that in the little things that come along in our lives? Because nobody's threatening our lives right now yet. Nobody's threatening to kill us because we're Christians here. So what should we take away from that?
I mean, they're set up here again, like at worst to commit crass idolatry, and at best to do something unconscionable while making an oath of fealty, right? And so they do the thing that they can do. They show respect to the king,
Yeah.
and prove that they are going to continue to respect the king until he puts them in an untenable position.
Yeah.
And then they say that, yeah, we can respect you as the highest guy in this land until you make us put our God under you, and we will never do that.
So that question, what were they confident about? And this goes back to, I want us to keep growing as teachers of the Bible, whether we're called teachers of the Bible or parents, that we don't just stop at what faith they had, that they were going to be okay, that God was going to rescue them. And when we're little, if we don't understand that rescue could have taken a couple of different forms, then we're missing how we can talk to a family that has their child COVID positive, or a family who has their father diagnosed with late stage, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. We miss part of the comfort that we can bring to people when we insist that the only way that God can rescue is by physical healing or physical deliverance from the danger that's there. And if that's what we do, we're setting our kids up for disappointment, or we're setting ourselves up for disappointment, because it's going to happen that the disease or the hatred is going to manifest, and you lose your job, or you lose your life, or you get sick, and that's where the theologian of glory is left with either God failed or you failed, and therefore God couldn't save you.
Yeah.
And that's so hard.
And so to be able to sing the first line of "If God Himself before me, I may a host defy," because Lord, when at last your angels come to Abram's bosom, bear me home. You know, like the outcome there is going to be either defiance of this foe in such an obvious way to everybody else, or hanging out with Abraham.
Yeah. So that's that. They are perfectly confident that this goes right. I don't know whether we're going to die or not, but this goes right.
Whatever outcome God chooses is the right outcome.
Yeah. So, and man, COVID's not scary then. It may be really painful. It's not like I'm sure that they're looking at this going, "Oh Lord, I really hope that the pain receptors get burned quickly, or that I inhale, and I hope this goes quick, because I'm not really looking forward to pain, but I know this ends right." These are the things that I sit and think about. Are they, even if it does not, we want you to know, O King, again, there's this, is it angry defiance or respectful disobedience? It's respectful disobedience. We want you to know that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up. Who's really being opposed here? It's not the authority that God has established, even though this authority is trying to, what would be the phrase, trying to establish his dominance and maybe making use of a false god to do so. Your God is going to be proved to be powerless. And in this, at the same time, it's going to prove to you again, O man of power, that this doesn't come from you.
Yeah.
That the authority that you have doesn't come from you. All right. Furious ordered hot, 7 times hotter than usual. And I don't know, the way that we imagine this this furnace being not a cast iron box, but either
I'm imagining like a forge, for a smelting forge,
like
for
like
really
a forge,
large,
like a kiln, like that.
Yeah.
And with a spot in the bottom where either fuel could be added or air can be pumped in to heat it even more.
Or it might have been just a single purpose torture furnace that he had specially built for this situation.
He's capable of this. The dude is capable of this. Like, oh, look, it's the we've got an infinity pool over here, and well, that's the furnace for burning people over there. It's got a nice view.
Obviously, I mean, he could see him right in there.
He's so intent on this that he costs himself the lives of some of the strongest, most valuable soldiers in his army. So these men wearing their it's Daniel's penchant for listing things.
Yeah.
Robes, trousers, turbans, other clothes, bound and thrown in the furnace. So urgent that the soldiers were killed. All 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the fiery furnace, into the blazing furnace. Where do you want to read to?
I'll just start. You tell me when to stop. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, O king." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out! Come here!" So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them.
Daniel is thorough. Yeah. I appreciate Daniel's thoroughness. Nebuchadnezzar is amazed. It's like he's sitting back looking through the little hole, or however it's designed for his viewing pleasure. He's waiting to see any evidence of disobedience crushed and for everybody to behold too. This is the reason the Romans crucified.
Mm-hmm.
This is what happens to anybody who defies us. This is what happens. And I suppose it's the penal aspect of any form of justice. It's a curb against future apparent behavior for somebody who doesn't want anybody defying him. Hey, didn't we throw 3 guys in there? Yeah, it was. But there we see 4 men walking around, unbound, unharmed, and a 4th that looks like the son of the gods. Other than them not dying in there, what are other things there that the little details that help us see the miraculous here?
I hope that the ropes burned off and then nothing else burned. That's kind of like...
Yeah, so this isn't that they fell down...
That's more fun for me to imagine than the ropes just like...
untied one another? Oh, that they just disappeared?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go on record on saying I'm pretty confident the ropes burned. Like the ropes went up like flags.
This is what happens to your power.
Yeah.
In the face of God's power.
You chain God's people. God burns away your chains and leaves them untouched.
Yeah.
What a and so we threw them in there. Guys died throwing them in there. These guys stand up, unbound, unharmed, walk around in there,
Yeah.
and there is one who looks like a son of the gods with them. Again, devil, man, you walk into one blunder after another. Other little details that amaze us here. Fire had not harmed their bodies, so it wasn't just that these guys escaped by the skin of their teeth. Bodies not harmed, not a hair in their heads singed, robes weren't scorched, not even the smell of fire on them.
Yeah.
I think I asked it up a little earlier. Have you ever seen a firewalker? Like when they show you the guys who walk on coals in Southeast Asia or India, I'm almost guarantee you go and find a firewalker video, and you will find that they're either wearing shorts or some kind of loincloth,
Yeah.
but little else, because you don't want, having been somebody who did some firewalking, jumping across bonfires and stuff, little hole in a pair of jeans. I've got a scar on my leg right here. Little hole in the pair of jeans frayed, and the little phrase on there caught fire and burned right the hole in my leg. Yeah, you definitely don't you don't survive jumping into a fire with your turban, your outer clothing on, your shoes, fully dressed like that. It's going to catch fire, and you're going to you would be better off rolling through a fire with nothing on than if you're fully clothed
Right,
and it
yeah.
catches fire. And I'm not saying that anybody is going to come out spotless, but you'd be better off just rolling through it quick than rolling through it with all this clothes on. All right. My little point there. Where are we?
Zach's right at the bottom there. Oh, no, Nathan's also.
Nathan. Okay.
Yeah.
It was apparent that the God they served went in there with them. What God will save you from my hand? The one who sends someone who's like the son of a God here.
Yeah.
Maybe the point is that nothing about them surviving the furnace was humanly logical. Yeah, that's it isn't. You know what you smell like after spending a even 15 minutes next to a bonfire.
Yep.
And you know what it like, just so you don't think they found a cool, not aesthetically but thermally, a cool place in the bonfire in which they could make believe that they stood in the middle of the fire and didn't get burned, or had asbestos underwear on for a little while. No, nothing burned. Not a hair on their head was singed. They didn't smell like smoke. But the ropes you threw them in there, that you bound them up with, completely gone. Like, let me show God versus gods. What an awesome. All right. Nebuchadnezzar's reaction, I suppose. I don't know any other details that you think of there that draw your attention.
It's just amazing. It's just
Well,
amazing and meant to be amazing.
So we teach it as a Sunday school lesson, and we teach the major details of it. False god, demanding worship of false god. Believer says, "I will not do that, and I will not do that under penalty of death," and God delivers them. And that's absolutely the major details and the things I want you to know and remember.
And the God that you have can do this, no matter what the situation.
Yeah.
And sometimes he chooses that not doing this is better.
Yeah.
Sometimes he chooses that.
So I think there's all these other little details. I have to stop myself from. I'm really glad I learned the major points in Sunday school, and I would rather have our children know those points
absolutely.
than all the other little things that I think are interesting and helpful. But I think we can nurture them in ways that they get a lot more of these things too. Nathan says some people say that it was the pre-incarnate Christ in the furnace with them. What do I think? I think both Nebuchadnezzar's reaction here. Well, let's read to the end here and find out the things he has to say here.
Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." And the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon.
All right, Nathan, your question there was one that comes to my mind, and I still struggle with it because nobody corrects Nebuchadnezzar here. God sent his angel. If it had just been, if they had left it at is one who looks like a son of man, a son of the gods, yeah. I would be more inclined to say it's awesome to think here's Jesus delivering his sons and delivering his people from it. I can't say that absolutely. It can just be that he sent one of his powerful angels to do his bidding. I'd like to just be able to say this is Jesus, but the text doesn't give us the absolute confidence to say that here.
I think like when you draw back a little bit and say why does Daniel include that detail? Why does Daniel include the detail that the king noticed that there was a fourth entity in the fire,
the son of the gods,
and so why is that there? What does that tell us? What does that tell us about God? What does that tell us about man? It tells us that God wanted to make his presence and aid obvious.
Yeah.
Make like any of like if you burn something really really hot, it's so hot that it like if the combustion is perfectly complete, I don't think you get that smoky smell because all of those things get incinerated and turned into their other byproducts, right? And so chemically, there's a way that they might not have smelled. But there's also no way that happens and they don't get burnt, right?
They're not
so
dead.
Like you can try and pull on this thing or that thing and prove this thing or that thing.
Yeah.
But
so if it had just
the presence of a fourth individual is
so if there had just been the three guys in there, the three guys go in, three guys come out, and you only see three guys in there, and something happened.
The fool could imagine his way to saying there is no God.
Yeah.
But here the point is. This is
God delivering his people.
This is God delivering his people, and whether which arm of God's power was being used is, I'm content to let that be a coin flip. Whether God
I will
was
look
using
forward
one
to getting
arm or
the.
the other.
I want answers one day, and we will get them.
Yeah.
Just maybe not this side of heaven. Nebuchadnezzar clearly understands the showdown that just took place. Praise be to this God, which just happens to be the same God that I praised
last week
with Daniel. I didn't know this was your God too. Do we give him credit for acknowledging that truth now? Do we? How much credit do we give to him? Do we say this is spark of faith, or that he's beginning to understand who the one true God is going to grow from here to his understanding of what the one true God has promised?
You think about the classic definition of what faith is. It involves knowing something, believing it's true, and then also like acting.
Knowledge,
assent, and trust,
and
right?
Confidence.
So here he knows that God is more powerful than he is, and any other God that he's ever witnessed. He agrees that this God is worthy of praise. So does he trust God? Does he make this the decision making engine? How he makes his decisions in his life? How he thinks about his afterlife.
This is the God who rescues his servants. They trusted in him, and they defied me, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any God except their own.
So
he just ends up giving the best confessions of
yeah,
acknowledgement
to the
of who
specific
true God is.
question. Yes, he does acknowledge the truth.
Yeah, yeah.
Does he trust the truth?
We'll
I
see.
hope so.
Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they need to be cut to pieces in their house and be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save. If we see a spark of understanding in Nebuchadnezzar, what is somewhat understanding about his response? And this would be the place that sometimes a new convert rightly looks at, wow, this is what is true. Destroy all the rest of it.
Yeah.
If I don't know whether whether we're going to see Nebuchadnezzar in heaven or not, but there's acknowledgement of who the true God is, and there is no understanding of the will of the one true God when it comes to his patience with sinners, because
he understands I crossed this God, and this is how he showed his power.
Yes.
I would prefer that nobody else cross this God or get me in trouble for allowing them to cross this God, and then being on the non-salvific end of his power.
You're being more
right?
generous than me. I'm just seeing him as still being this murderous, horrifyingly violent man who goes from threatening God's people to then just turning around and
threatening the opposite,
and threatening everybody else. Yeah. You're a dead man. Everybody's a dead man. It's like, man, quit pointing that thing at people.
Yeah, this is
put it down and understand a little bit about who this God is now.
It's his only response to power is you're gonna die if you don't submit to power.
Oh my goodness! Yeah. It's just, you can't kill everybody. Stop threatening to kill everybody. Oh, I want to talk to this guy at some point. It would be so much fun to talk to this guy at some point if he's there, or to Daniel. Did you just want to pull your hair out at some point? Yeah. Huh. All right. A couple of wrap up type questions here. A statement. Satan is always seeking to challenge our faith and our hope. He wanted to challenge Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and he's going to do that later on with Daniel too. Mm-hmm. How does he do it? How is he doing it right now? Challenging our faith and our hope.
There are just so many situations in the world. Like people seem to be roundly agreeing that 2020 is the worst year since the other worst year, whatever year that was. I don't know. And all of those are ways where Satan would love for us to say that God's not in control, rather than say that he is in control. To just give in to the belief that this is just random and terrible, and the universe is callous and spiteful.
And to go along right now with what the opinion of the world is in terms of, we got to destroy it all.
Yeah.
We have to destroy everything and everyone and every source of authority, every hint of authority, and that kind of chaos isn't God's will. The other part of that is that are we willing to give up our lives or our job or our friends in order to remain faithful to the Lord? Are we willing to remain faithful even if God doesn't help us?
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to recognize. I'm going to do this even if part of God's will is you're going to suffer for following this.
Yeah.
I'm confident God will do right.
Mm-hmm.
Will not the creator of all do right? Yeah. I'm confident that God will do right, but I'm not so confident that I'm going to end up coming out of this smelling like,
right.
What is the?
I might smell like smoke.
I might smell like smoke, and I might
smell like charred ruins.
I might smell like charcoal. Yeah. Weren't the Babylonians polytheists? Did we get all the rest of those comments? Yeah, Nathan says Satan wants us to doubt God's love or power by turning our focus on the misery around us. That's such an easy thing to do, is convince people that where's your God here? Where's your God now?
Yeah.
Look at what your God allowed to happen to those who put their faith in him. I will never be put to shame. I will never be. I will never regret having done that. So, all right, let's close with let's close with the Lord's Prayer this morning, because we ask for His will to be done. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. All right, we were a little bit past our time. Thank you to everybody for your patience and your input and your.
Hey, Pastor.
Yes.
Sometimes the smell of charcoal is not bad.
I was wondering when that was going to get there. As long as it's
as long as there's a meaty smell that goes along with it.
Well, it's as long as it's.
I think that Driver's Ed movie was Signal 30, and there was also another one called
Blood Runs Red on the Highway.
Yeah. I thought Scared Straight was one of those after-school deals where bad kids went to a prison and the inmates.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
See, isn't it strange that they're both familiar with with those threatening videos? Somebody did some work. So your mom and dad, when I was out there a couple weeks ago, and I'm not talking out of, well, maybe I am talking out of school here. They were talking about one of their sons, and they wouldn't tell me which one it was. And I was not to try and figure it out either.
One of their sons did what?
One of their sons was more difficult than the other.
We got a 50-50.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Isn't that obvious?
All right. Thank you, guys.
Be safe.
Have a good weekend or a good week.
You too. We'll talk to you guys later.
All right.